In this lesson video, we will continue modeling our robot. Now we will focus on the arm. We are going to create the arm using a cylinder and a NURBS curve. Now from this point forward, I won't be explaining too much detail on most commonly used keyboard shortcuts. I assume you already know them, as you heard me explaining those shortcuts dozens of times before. First, we need to move the 3D cursor to the center of the hole at the shoulder. So select the upper torso, go to Edit Mode, and select this face, Shift S, and then choose Cursor to Selected. Go back to the Object Mode, and create a cylinder. For this cylinder, we don't need 32 vertices. Let's change this to 12 instead. Now we need to rotate this 90 degrees on the Y-axis. Previously, I always rotate inside the edit mode to prevent changing the origin's default orientation. I'm going to show you another way, which is basically using the apply transformation operation. So press R, Y, and then type 90. Then we need to apply the rotation by pressing Ctrl A and choose rotation. The end result is the same with you rotating the mesh inside the edit mode. Next, scale this object so it is about the size of the hole. I think this is too big. Let me scale this down a bit. Now, because we did scaling on the object, let's apply the scale also. Next, we want to create a repeatable mesh unit for the robot's snake-like arm. Select this face and move it like so. Insert it, and then extrude it. Now, before we exit the wireframe mode, later we will need to create a curve object to deform the arm mesh. To be able to do that perfectly, the origin of the curve has to be at the same location as the mesh origin location. Because we moved the mesh before, the 3D cursor is not aligned anymore with the mesh origin. So we need to press Shift S again and then choose Cursor to Selected. Now the 3D cursor is aligned perfectly with the mesh origin. This way, when later we create the curve and deform the arm, we wouldn't have any alignment problems. Let's go back to Object Mode and add the Array modifier. Oh, sorry, I forgot to fix the smoothing group. Right-click, Shade Smooth, then turn on the Auto Smooth option, and make this 50 degrees just like the rest of the objects in the scene. This is actually enough as the corners form 90 degrees angle, but let's assign the edge sharp attributes to the corner edges just to be safe. Select all of these edge loops, right-click, and then mark sharp. Okay, looks good. Next, we want to repeat this mesh over and over again. We can do this by using a modifier called Array. So add modifier and then choose Array here. If we input 12 here, for example, we'll get 12 copies of the original mesh. Now by default, the Array modifier uses a relative offset of 1, meaning the mesh will be repeated exactly per one of its length. The starting vertices will meet the end vertices perfectly. I actually wanted to overlap a little. To do that, we can reduce the X relative offset value here to around 0.8. So until now, we have something like this. Next, we need to create a curve to deform the arm. We can do this in many different ways, but I like to work with point-to-point modeling techniques first, and then later convert it to a NURBS curve. We already have the 3D cursor in place, so press Shift A and create a single vertex object. Now we have a vertex here and automatically went to the edit mode. Make sure we are in the vertex mode now. Go to the front view, turn on the front reference, hold Ctrl and then right-click here. Now, I think I want to make this a bit further from the initial plan. Let's just see what happens. So Ctrl and right-click here. Let's see this from the side view. Hide the front reference and unhide the side reference. Move this vertex here. and this vertex to about this location. Next, we can bevel this vertex to create more edges. So Shift Ctrl B and make it like so. Next, we need to convert this mesh network into a curve. The reason for this is because later we will use a modifier called curve to deform the mesh, which only works with curve objects. So go to Object Mode. In the Object menu, select Convert to and then choose Curve here. The object now is a curve type object, but it is a polytype curve. If we want the curve object to be able to bend smoothly, we need either a Bezier type or a NURBS type. I prefer the NURBS curve as it has less complexity than the Bezier type. To convert it, we need to go to the Edit mode. In the Curve menu, find Set Spline Type and then choose NURBS here. Now we have a NURBS curve. The problem with the default NURBS setting is that the resulting curve is floating at the center like this. Of course, we don't want the arm to float in the air like this. We want it to exist from the start to the end of the control points locations. We can fix this by going to the Curve Data Properties panel. In the Active Spline section, turn on the Endpoint U option. Now we have the resulting curve from end to end. Let's tweak the control points first, so we have a nicer pose for the arm deformation. Okay, let's get back to the object mode. Next, to make the arm object follows the curve, we need to add a curve modifier on the arm object. So select the arm object, open the modifier panel. After the array modifier, we add the curve modifier. Next, we need to tell the modifier that we want to use this curve object. To do this, we can use the eyedropper tool here or just use the list here. Because we only have one curve object in the scene, we can only see one listed here. Select it, and we can see the arm now bends following the curve object. Let's rename the curve object so it will be easier when later we need to select it from the outliner. Name this arm.curve. For the mesh object, let's just rename this to arm. Next, to have an arm also on the left side, we can use the mirror modifier. So we are adding the mirror modifier after the curve modifier. By default, the mirror modifier uses the origin as the mirror plane location. This is not what we want. We want to use the center of the world as the mirror plane. To do this, we can create an empty object at the center of the world, or we can just pick the mirror plane reference from any existing object that already has the origin located at the center of the world. Currently, we already have two objects located at the center, the upper torso and the lower torso. Let's pick the upper torso by going to the list here and choose torso.upper. Now we have two arms that are symmetrical.